Right, welcome to Guerrilla Studios, where we're asking the question, what the heck are all these buttons for? So I'm going to quickly take you through one of the channel strips on the console and explain to you what all the buttons for those do. And I'll also explain how we've got it routed here, just so that if you're ever working here, you can figure out what's going on without consulting the manual every 5 seconds or phoning me up, which seems to be the preferred method. Okay, so we've got a Tascam M3700. This is a 32 channel input 8 bus, and it's an early 90s, I believe, analog console. So let's assume that we've got a mic plugged in on channel 1. So we're going to bring up the fader for channel 1. At the top here we've got the meter bridge for channel 1, and with it being an analog console, you can go a bit into the red. You don't have to worry about that like you do with the digital one. If it's digital, that's really bad, but on analog it might not be bad, but it might be. You have to use the holes on the side of your head and decide for yourself. Okay, phantom power, push that if the mic requires phantom power. If it doesn't, then it doesn't need to be pushed. Pad, now pad is like an attenuator. So let's say you've got a super hot signal coming in and it's a little bit uncontrollable with the trim pot. You can press pad. That will reduce the signal somewhat so that you can control it more with the trim pot there. And we've got the line trim pot. If you're using a line in instead of the mic, you would push the line button, but we're not. We're going to use a mic. Flip button, I'll come back to that in a minute. That's to do with the monitoring section, so we'll cover that in a moment. HPF, high pass filter. If you don't know what a high pass filter is, then you should probably go and watch some other YouTube videos. You've got your 4-band EQ. You can turn it on by pushing the button. The light indicates that it is on. If it's not, then the light is not on. Auxiliary section. So we've got trim pots, 1 to 3, 2 to 4. These are in pairs, and you can switch between the two with the switch. You can also have the monitor section or the post fader going out to the auxiliary section. You can mute it as well. 5 and 6 have their own individual ones. We actually have here auxiliary 1 going out to the main studio out there as an alternative monitor mix. So if you've got a fussy musician who wants his own monitor mix, we can just stick him on aux 1. So now we get down to the monitor section. So each channel has its own short fader. This is just going out the stereo out for monitoring purposes. And at the moment we are listening to a pre-main fader. If input is selected, we would be listening, and the flip button is up, we will be listening to the tape returns. But as we're not using the tape returns, we leave the flip button up and we have a pre-fade listen on the monitor fader. So that's what the flip button does. You can also mute that out and pan it as well because it's going out in stereo. And we've got our channel assignment switches. So these are 8, you've got your 8 subgroups in pairs. And we've got the pan knob here, which is also left and right. It says odd and even. So if you've got 1 pushed and we're all the way to the left, that would be 1. All the way to the right would be 2. And that's the same for all the others. We can also assign to send this channel out to the stereo left and right. If that isn't pushed, you might find you've got no output, so that generally needs to be pushed in. You can solo mute it. You've also got your overload light, and down to the main channel fader. So we've got a bypass button here and a bypass light illuminated. Now that does not mean that this fader is bypassed. This is referring to the VCA automation, which is over there. VCA automation is voltage controlled, so it can add some noise into your signal chain. So while you're recording, that should always be bypassed. The only time you need that is if you're mixing and you're actually using the automation, in which case you can write and update what you've been doing with the faders and it will remember it. You can also take a snapshot of how the console is set up. There are other features that are automated, like the EQs. You can turn them on and off, and you can take a snapshot and recall that, saving it anytime on a snazzy little disc which nobody's used for a long time. Okay, let's scooch on over to the master section. We've got first we've got the effects returns. 4 effects returns. They're also on short faders. You can assign those to the groups and left and right out respectively. Same deal with the pan. You've got left, right, odd and even. Same deal with all the other channels, you can solo mute those as well. Auxiliary master, trim pots, what we're listening to in the control room. Now we've got the solo light, so if any of your channels are soloed, this light, I don't know if you can see, will illuminate just to tell you that you have something soloed. That's your solo volume trim pot and your pre-fade listen. You can turn it on and off. And your auxiliary, listening to the auxiliary. So this is what we're listening to in the control rooms. At the moment we're listening to the stereo out of the desk, which is the same as the monitoring out in the live room there. We could listen to the 2-track, but we don't have a 2-track, so that's redundant. External source, that is whatever's coming out of the interface there, which would be interfaced with your software. So that's your external source, and then yeah, you've got your auxiliaries that you could be listening to as well. A and B, these refer to the 2 options for monitoring in the control room. So B is near field monitors, A would be your big monitors, but we're just using near field at the moment, so we're on B. You can dim the volume in the control room by about 30 dB if you push that, and also listen to it in mono if you want. Now let's go to the talk back section, because that also refers to the dimming. If you press talk back, I'll just lean over there, that automatically dims the signal in the control room so that you don't get any feedback, and you've got a trim pot for that. Slate talks back to everything, and aux 1 and 4 if you just wanted to talk back on aux 1 and 4 there. And we've got our headphones, monitoring headphones. Socket is sneaky under there, and your main studio output there. You can also listen to them in mono as well if you like. So I think that just about covers most of the buttons and switches. So I'll tell you a little bit about the routing here. So we record primarily to a multi-track machine there. So the signals all coming in channels 1 to 16. All these channels, these go out directly to the multi-track. Then once we're happy with what we've recorded and we've done any overdubs or corrected any mistakes or anything like that, we can move on to mixing. And for mixing, the multi-track machine will play back, rather than using the tape returns, for a bit more flexibility, we've got the tape machine coming back through channels 17 to 32. So that also means you can set up a separate monitor mix for what's coming back from the tape machine rather than listening to what's going into the tape machine. And then once we get to this stage, we can mix the record and get it sounding how we want it before we mix down to via the interface to your software. So that would be done once you finish the recording and you're happy with your mix. We basically mix it down to the software at that point. So for the most part, we're tracking to tape. That's our 16-track multi-track machine there. So that's how the routing goes here. I hope you found that helpful, and if you're ever working here, you won't have to keep consulting the manual. Enjoy.